Hey everybody, Brandy here doing my comments from my Stampin' Studio today. Today we're going to do a card project that involves a couple of different techniques. And I've got a surprise at the end of the video, so please do stick around for that. But today we're going to be recreating a Bokeh effect. Now, we do have a stamp in the new catalog that has the Bokeh effect all in the stamp. And I was wanting to do a card, and I haven't gotten that stamp yet. But I was looking at all of the inspiration on Pinterest, and I saw that a lot of people were using the Dandelion Wishes along with this Bokeh stamp set. And I can't remember the name of the stamp set is at the moment, but I really wanted that effect, but I didn't have the stamp. So I was thinking, how can I do this? So a couple techniques that we're going to do today. One is how to create a Bokeh type effect if you don't have that stamp. And two, how to make your own masked areas using your square framelits. So you'll see this is a rectangle, and I actually made that masked area using my rectangle, using my square, what do you call it? Thinlits? Framelits. And so I wanted to show you those two techniques. So we're going to work on that in this video, and then at the end we're going to put the card together. Now don't forget, stick around for my surprise at the end, all right? All right, let me get the camera turned around. Okay, we're going to get started here. So again, this is the card that we are making. I used the Dandelion Wishes for this stamp and then the sentiment. And then I also masked off an area to do the Bokeh effect. And the first thing we need to do is actually create our mask. Now, I did a little bit of designing with this, and there was a lot of different measurements that I took. If you will look at the links down below, you'll find the measurements, or the link to my blog post that has the tutorial on all of the measurements used in this project. But basically, my white cardstock is going to be measuring 4 3/4 by 3.5. And so I wanted to make sure that I had an even amount of space on all sides. I kind of wanted it centered. I wanted the same aspect ratio. And so, you know, I basically, when I create cards, I tend to try to do it in increments of 1/4 inch. So this is 4 3/4 by 3.5. And so I basically would go back down 1/4 inch until I got to the spacing that I wanted. And hold on one second, I forgot something. Okay, sorry about that. All right, so the first thing I need to do is determine the size of my mat. Now, I basically work my way backwards based on the size of the paper that I'm actually going to stamp on. And in this case, this white piece of paper is 4 3/4 by 3.5. And don't forget, the measurements of all of this will be on a PDF on my blog post that I'll post down below. So it's going to be 3.5 by 4 3/4. And I tend to do my designs, if possible, in 1/4 increments. Sometimes I do it in 1/8 inches, which is what I did with this black mat. But I don't do that very often. I usually try to stick to 1/4 inches because it just makes it easier for me to figure out dimensions on my card. But in this case, again, this is 4 3/4 by 3.5. And so I know for one thing is that I want my mat to be at least 1/4 inch smaller on all sides of the mat that I'm going to be, of the paper that I'm going to be stamping on. And I do that for a couple of reasons, is that I want to make sure that I've got enough space all the way around to be able to tape my mat onto the cardstock. If I were to cut it the same size, then I wouldn't have anything to tape that down to, and then I'm likely to have that kind of move, and I don't want that to happen. All right, so we already know that my cardboard, and I'm using some chipboard here, needs to be at least a 1/4 of an inch smaller than the paper that you're stamping on. All right, and so now trying to figure out what how I want the hole. And I did a couple of things. I looked at, you know, the different framelits that I have, and that kind of gave me an indication of where I wanted that. And let's see here, I can just pull out a couple of other ones just to kind of give you an idea. So I'm trying to figure out, you know, all right, so do I want it that wide? I'm not sure I really like that. Or do I want it this skinny? No, I want more of that Bokeh effect covering the paper. So I settled on this, all right? And I figured out that this was going to be about an inch and not an inch, 3/4 of an inch inward. And since this is already 1/4 of an inch inward, that meant that I needed to make my my little template here a 1/2 inch in there. So what I did was I would use my ruler, all right, and this is just to give me a guide when I go to die cut it. So I will make a little notch there. This is a 1/2 inch. And whatever your design calls for, I mean, that's what you're going to put. But for this one, I'm going to do a 1/2 inch. All right. Okay. Where's my glasses? It's getting kind of hard for me to see. All right. So in order to kind of line this up, I use either grid paper or in this case my self-healing mat. And I'm just going to put my ruler here. And this doesn't have to be exact. This is just basically a guide. So when you get it on the big shot, you'll know approximately where you need to place that framelit. And it kind of helps you kind of get it a little bit straight. And I mean, that's what we're looking for. And this also kind of helps you, you know, look at it and make sure you've got it centered. Is that the amount of space that you want peeking out of your mask? Okay, so essentially what I've drawn is basically that, okay? All right, let me get my big shot over here, and then I'm going to show you how we make this square into a rectangle. One moment. Okay, all right, so what we're going to do here is we're going to place our framelit. We're just going to kind of try to line it up as best as we can to the guide marks that we've already placed. And we're going to put this top plate, we're going to slide it in there. Now before we do that, actually, let's go ahead and tape it so we don't accidentally move it. Okay, make sure you got that straight. You can put 2 pieces on there just to make sure. And I'm not super critical about whether it's exactly straight. I mean, these are handmade cards. Come on now. All right, so I'm going to place my plate in there. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make sure that my plate only goes, let's see if I can move this a little bit, to the edge. I don't want it to go all the way over, otherwise it's going to make a square instead of a rectangle. All right, so we do this. We've got that in there. We'll crank it through. Okay. All right. Now as we pull this up, we'll notice that we've got kind of like a half cut there. All right. Put it back through here. And now we're going to do the other side. Again, we're just going to line it up as close as we can. Okay. Now, when we do this, actually I'm going to turn it this way. So the cut edge is over here towards this. And I'm only doing this because it's a little bit easier to see. All right. Oops. No, I'm wrong. I want it this way. All right, so I'm going to put my plate in. And this is the cut side, so I'm going to go just right up to that edge of that framelit. You can see that there. And then I'm going to run it through again. And now we have a rectangle mask. So that was pretty easy. And you can use your square framelits to create those rectangles. Who knew? Now you do. All right, you can also use your stitched framelits to do that. You can use your scalloped framelits to do that. I mean, just depending on what kind of edge you want. I was looking for a straight edge, so I needed the just the square, just the plain square framelit. All right, let's move this out of the way. Okay, so we're going to bring in my white paper here. I'm going to use, this already has tape on it, so I'm going to reuse this. Okay, so I'm going to put the mask down, and then I'm going to just tape it right onto my surface. If you're using grid paper, you can tape it right onto your grid paper. And I just kind of eyeball it. And I don't think I have that on straight, so I'm going to reposition it. And I always use washi tape for this because it makes it a little bit easier to reposition if you've gotten it wrong. All right, that looks good. Okay, so now, actually, now you can't see it. Let me move it up. There we go. I'm going to reposition it again. Does that look straight? Yeah, close enough. I try not to get too over OCD about my cards. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Okay, so we're using mint macaroon for our ink. And we're going to be using a dauber. Now you can also use your sponges, you know, if you cut them up. But what I found is that when I use the sponges, it didn't create this circle effect. And so the daubers are going to be really good for that bokeh effect. So I'm just going to, you know, ink up my dauber. And let me see here. I need a piece of paper, scrap paper. All right, so I like to, when I ink it up, I like to first ink off because that first stamp is going to be really dark and I don't want it to be super dark. And so I'm just going to go in here and start stamping around, ink up some more. It just sort of, you know, creates that kind of bokeh effect. You can get as dark or as light as you want. I try not to leave too much white space because I don't really want you to see the edge of the dauber. But again, that's all personal preference. All right, so that's basically it. I make sure that I kind of do that, do the stamping right along the edge as much as I can, because then that's going to give me that kind of masked off, sharp, clean edge look. Ta-da! All right, so that's how you create the bokeh effect. All right, so now I want to use my Stamparatus to stamp the rest of it. And I've already got my stamps positioned where I want them. And I'm going to clean that with a baby wipe. And then I use a camping towel to clean my stamps as well as clean surfaces like this. You can get these on Amazon, and I'll post a link down below where I got mine. I like it because it doesn't have a lot of felt that comes off. You want to be sure that whatever you're cleaning your stamps with doesn't peel and come off, because then that can affect your stamp quality. All right, so we're going to go ahead and position this guy in here. And like I said, I've already done one of these cards, so I already have my stamps set up. Okay, I'm going to use my Memento Black, and I'm going to put something underneath this. Let's see if this will, yeah. I like to have something underneath. You could use a stamp set box or a clear block. All right, so I'm using black Memento, and I just kind of, with this particular ink pad, I just kind of circle around. It seems to do well for me. Okay. All right, then I'm gonna push that down. Ta-da! Looks great. Now, one thing I've noticed, and I did this a couple of times, if you have your magnets, you know, somewhere around here, and you go to try to take it off and you can't lift it off completely, what you're going to run the risk of is smearing your ink. So one tip that I would like to share with you is that use your heat gun just to kind of set the ink, and I just put it on the first setting. And so that just, you know, gives me a little extra precaution there so I don't run the ink trying to get the magnets off. All right, so we have that. Okay, I'm going to set that to the side. All right, now to assemble this card, I'm going to use my black matting. And I'm going to use my snail adhesive to do that. I'm going to center that. Okay, and I'm going to embellish this with one of my black rhinestones. And I'm going to use my little handy dandy tweezers here, and I'll link below where I got this. I got a whole set of tweezers that were really good for crafting. Oops. And this just sort of helps me position it where I want it. Love it. All right, so I got that little bling there, and then we use our card base, which I've already cut and scored. I'm going to use my bone folder to brandish the edge. And then, of course, that's where that goes. I'm going to use my snail. Get that centered. There you go. All right. All right, let me flip the camera over. All right, I hope you enjoyed that tutorial and those little tips and tricks that I shared there. We've got the bokeh effect without having to use the stamp. And then we also had the matte effect, making your own mats using your square framelits. You can use a square to make a rectangle. The other thing I wanted to share with you all is that I have decided to help other crafters build their craft blogs. And I've created a Facebook group if you'd like to join. It's called Create and Blog Like You Mean It with Brandy Mahon. If you go to Facebook and just in the little URL, type that in, Create and Blog Like You Mean It with Brandy Mahon, you'll get directed to my Facebook group where I am sharing tips and tricks on how to blog, how to make videos, how to track your traffic, all of those kinds of things in that group. And I will post a link down below where you can find that as well. Okay, well, I hope this video has been useful for you and you have enjoyed learning how to get more life or how to get more use out of your square framelits and how to create that bokeh effect if you don't have that bokeh stamp that we currently have in our catalog. All right, if you do like this video, please do give me a thumbs up. Make sure that you subscribe and hit that bell. And when you do that, you'll get notified every time I upload a new video. If you have a question or want me to make another tutorial, please do make a comment down below and let me know what you're interested in learning. All right? Life happens and I comment. Stamp me some love. Take care and have a great day.